Okay, let's be real. We've all been there. You spend weeks crafting the perfect murder mystery for your ttrpg campaign, and then it just falls flat.
Why?
Well, it usually fails for one simple reason. We design these mysteries for how we wish our players thought, not for how they actually think. So let's dive into that disconnect, because once you really get it, you can start building mysteries that are basically guaranteed to work.
In our heads, we picture our players as these brilliant detectives, right? They're going to be like Sherlock Holmes, carefully sifting through evidence, weighing every possibility. But the reality, our players are emotional storytellers. They run on pure vibes. They grab onto the first interesting thing they see and just run with it. Once they decide on a theory, good luck getting them to let it go.
I call this huge gap in expectations the Sherlock Holmes illusion. So let's break down the actual psychology of how your players process a mystery. Because once you see what's really going on in their heads, you can start designing for them instead of constantly fighting against their instincts.
You know this exact moment at the table, right? The instant a player finds something that just feels important. They don't say, aha, a data point, let's gather more evidence. Nope, they say this. They don't build cases, they build stories. And that simple fact changes absolutely everything.
From that moment on, I bet it's this, every single new clue they find gets shoved through the filter of that pet theory. This is a totally real psychological thing called confirmation bias. If a clue supports their idea, it's the most important thing in the world. If a clue completely contradicts their theory, they'll either ignore it or, even more likely, they'll twist it around to somehow prove their original point. It's wild. But this isn't a flaw in your player, it's just how our brains are wired.
So this is the most important thing to remember. Your players are not being dumb, they're not being difficult. They're just being human. So if your mystery requires them to act like a computer, keeping 10 different possibilities in their head and weighing probabilities perfectly, well, you're building a game that's working against human nature itself.
Okay, so that's part one. But there's another huge piece to this puzzle. Let's talk about effort versus accuracy. We DMs often make a critical mistake. We assume that what players really want is to be correct. But honestly, that's not it at all.
Just think about where your players pour all their energy. It's not into quiet contemplation. It's into that 20-minute interrogation of the shifty-eyed guard. It's into that big dramatic speech where they accuse the Duchess in front of the whole court. It's in chasing some wild hunch across town just because it felt right. They are pouring their emotional investment into these actions. Because what players really want, deep down, is for all that effort to matter. So when you reveal that the correct answer was hidden under a floorboard they never checked, you've just invalidated their entire last 45 minutes of passionate roleplay. And that feels awful. Not because they failed to solve the puzzle, but because the game just told them that everything they did, all their choices and effort, was completely meaningless. And this right here, this highlights the absolute core of the problem. DMs, we think in terms of clues. We're focused on the forensics, the bloodstains, the footprints, the torn letter. But players, they think in causes. They immediately jump to motive and personality. They're asking, why would someone do this? While you're still presenting them with, what happened? You're speaking the language of forensics, and they're speaking the language of story.
So, has this ever happened at your table? You lay out all the evidence. It's crystal clear their theory's busted, but one player just digs in their heels? You know, at that point, it's not about logic anymore. There's something else going on entirely.
You see, the second a player says their theory out loud to the group, it's not just an idea anymore. It's social. It's become part of their identity in the story. So for them to abandon that theory, it doesn't feel like a logical correction. It feels like losing. It feels embarrassing. And so what do? They double down. They'll chase that bad lead into the ground, not because they think it's right, but because admitting they were wrong feels so much worse.
Okay, so we've torn the problem apart. Now what do we actually do about it? Simple. You don't fight player psychology. You design for it. Let's get into the good stuff. How to build mysteries that actually work with these natural human tendencies, not against them.
What you need is a totally new design philosophy, and it's built on 4 main ideas. First, and this is the big one, make every single theory useful. So what if they're wrong? Chasing that wrong theory should still lead them somewhere cool. A new clue, an interesting NPC, a piece of valuable lore. Second, let wrong move the story forward. A bad lead should never be a dead end. It should be a doorway to a new, interesting complication. Third, point your clues toward people. Forget just forensic facts. A clue should reveal a secret, a motive, a relationship. And finally, be flexible. Evolve with what your players believe. If they come up with a theory about the butler that is way cooler than your original plan, maybe the butler really did do it.
This all comes down to one fundamental shift in your thinking. A good mystery doesn't reward the players for being correct. It rewards them for being engaged.
It rewards them for trying, for having cool ideas, for caring enough to argue about it for an hour.
And really, this is the whole thing right here. Your goal isn't to create a perfect, airtight puzzle for them to solve. Your goal is to make their journey through that mystery, with all its wrong turns and weird ideas, feel valid and meaningful. If you can do that, you're going to get a satisfying conclusion every single time. So I'll leave you with one final question to think about for your next game night. Are you building a puzzle that needs to be solved? Or are you building a story that deserves to be experienced? The answer to that is going to change everything about how you design your next investigation.